Test. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm so
Now
sorry
I
there
can
was
hear
a
you, yes.
bad connection before. I'm so sorry. I will start from the beginning for today's event.
Thank
Is
you.
it okay?
Thank you
Okay,
very
no
much.
problem.
Okay. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan, and good afternoon everyone. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi rasulillahi ajmain. Amma ba'du. The Honorable Dr. Ani Susanti M.Pd BI as the head of English Education Department, the Honorable Nadine Sulkowski, today's guest lecturer from University of Gloucestershire, UK, the Honorable Rifai Akhsan M.Ed as the moderator of today's webinar, the Honorable all of the lecturer of English Education Department, and the respectable all of the participants and committees. First of all, let's say thanks to our God, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the Lord of the universe, who has been giving us His blessings and mercy so that we can gather in this webinar. Second of all, may peace be upon our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who has guided us into the right ways of life. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aisyah Ril Surya. As Master of Ceremony, I would like to say welcome to the International Webinar Series of English Education Department with the theme Tourism and Destination Resilience. Before starting our agenda, let me explain the agenda schedule of this webinar. First opening, second main agenda, third Q&A session, and the last is closing. The first agenda is opening. Let's open our event today by reciting Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, the next agenda is the main agenda which we are waiting for explanation from our guest lecturer, Mrs. Nadine. Before that, let me introduce Mr. Rifai as our moderator for today's webinar. Mr. Rifai is a lecturer at English Education Study Program Universitas Ahmad Dahlan. He finished his bachelor degree at Yogyakarta State University and also graduated from University of Wollongong, Australia for his master degree. Mr. Rifai is a head of Center of Tourism and Creative Business Kotres UAD. You can also read the detail of his experiences on the screen. Okay, for Mr. Rifai, time is yours.
Thank you, Miss, for giving me opportunity to moderate and to lead this session. Good afternoon in Indonesian time and good morning in London time. Nadine, am I
Good
audible?
morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, I think 7 hours is quite significant to spirit us in the different time, yeah, because here is afternoon, time to rest, and there you are in the morning, time to work, time to start.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, that's the beauty of the world. Yeah. But we thanks God because of the technology, the different time between London and Indonesia, 7 hours is not existent anymore. It's like in the same time now. Welcome everyone, and also we appreciate your attendance and your cooperation today. And we will be learning and discussing about very hot and very strategic, very critical and very crucial topic. This is about tourism development and destination resilience with our expert today, with Nadine Sulkowski. Well, as an introduction, Nadine is senior lecturer in University of Gloucestershire in United Kingdom. She is also coordinator in the Erasmus project, and especially in the tourism development, tourism sustainability, and also in the destination resilience. So today we are going to learn from her knowledge, her expertise, and her experience in terms of how to make balance on how to make intersection between industrial in tourism, especially in the economic aspect variables, and also in the industrial variable, and also in environmental variables. And it needs, the keyword is destination resilience, how to keep the existing of the destination to improve the quality of tourism. There are many factors affecting this thing and keeping the destination sustained, especially in the resilience, very important factors in when destination exists and also to improve the quality. And today we are very happy because we are having an honor to invite and to give chance get the lecture from Nadine, is very expert in destination resilience. And one in many cases, in some cases, there is conflict between economical interest and also environmental interest. Therefore, the destination resilience comes try to be the bridge, try to give intersections, meeting point among those variables. Okay, for the audience, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to learn and also to share and to listen explanation from Nadine about tourism and destination resilience. Nadine, you've got 60 minutes to present your ideas, and the remaining 30 minutes will be used for us to discuss more about this topic, tourism and destination resilience. If you're ready, you can start it now for 60 minutes ahead. Nadine?
Hey, thank you so much for this very warm welcome and good afternoon from my side. It is indeed very early here where I am. It's a very grey November morning, so I wish I was in Yogyakarta and could join you in person and enjoy the nice scenery and well, basically see you face to face. But unfortunately, that's not possible. So, but as you said, Rifai, it's wonderful that we have technology and that we can connect in this way. So, if I may, I will share my presentation.
Yes, please.
Just give you a moment. Okay. Right. Once more, thank you so much for the very kind introduction and also for saying a little bit about my background. My name is Nadine Sulkowski, and I have been working for the University of Gloucestershire for quite a long time. It'll be 16 years this December. And before I joined the University of Gloucestershire, I have lived in India and I have studied in the UK. And before my studies, I have worked in different hotel and resort outlets in Germany and in Spain. So it is true to say that tourism and destination management is something that is very, very close to my heart. It always has been very close to my heart. Both of my parents have worked in the tourism industry. In fact, my dad still is, even though he is past his retirement age, but he can't stop. So tourism is something which for me is very important, and I'm very passionate about it. And I also, in the years where I have grown up, I have seen very bad examples of tourism development. I have seen destinations that have suffered from over-tourism and from uncontrolled development. And I'm also seeing increasingly good examples of destination development. And that's really what I would like to share with you today, is what the principles of good destination development are, and how we can ensure that we are building resilience into destination development, because resilience is not something that can be separate or separated from economic development, from socioeconomic development. We need to make sure that resilience is the DNA of a destination. So what I would like to do with you today is to talk very briefly about the economic significance of tourism. So I'm going to show you some of the latest statistics. I'm going to talk to you about destination recovery and tourism strategies. So basically, what do we do if a destination has suffered a shock, has suffered adversity, and needs to think about how to redevelop itself? I'm going to talk to you about tourism strategy and development priorities. So basically, how do we decide what we need to focus on first in order to let tourism prosper in a destination, and also make sure that the destination is set up properly to accommodate this tourism activity. I will talk to you about strategic tourism partnerships, and also about the relationship between destination resilience and tourism diversification. It is a very important point. And I will end by showing you a few of the seminal models which are built around the topic of, or the concept of destination resilience. So what I would like to do, you see here a very beautiful landscape in the background. I'm going to talk to you about a case study. And I'm going to use this case study to introduce some of the principles of tourism development. It is a case study that I know very well. I will use Croatia, small country in the Mediterranean, and I have done quite significant research into destination development and tourism activity within Croatia a few years ago. So I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to share these insights with you, and hopefully you will find those interesting and valuable as well. So let's start with the economic significance of tourism. So these are some of the latest figures that I have extracted from Statista. And you can see here that obviously the pandemic is reflected here. Before the pandemic in 2019, tourism activity came to almost 10 billion GDP in the world. Then obviously we have seen a dip in 2020 because of the pandemic, and now we are on the rise again, and almost have reached a figure of $6 billion GDP worldwide. Now, the overall GDP within the world, if we're taking all of economic activity together, is about 95 trillion. So tourism as a sector is contributing roughly between 6 and 7% of overall GDP. And this is going to rise again in the next few years when we are seeing a recovery from the COVID pandemic. So it is not insignificant. So tourism is a very significant contributor to world GDP. And this is what makes it a vehicle for socioeconomic development, and also a vehicle for building prosperity and societal well-being. And that's really important for us to understand, because this also means that as tourism developers and as policymakers, we have a responsibility to make sure that tourism is developed properly, that it is developed with socioeconomic prosperity in mind, and also that we consider the importance of sustainability in this, so environmental sustainability and also socioeconomic sustainability. And we've heard earlier already that actually this is a balancing act, and this balancing act is quite complicated. So hopefully by the end of the session, you will all have a better understanding of those tensions. So just think about this this figure, 6% overall. That's the contribution that tourism in the world makes to the gross domestic product. Now, when we're looking at individual destinations, obviously the significance of tourism varies. So here I've got some figures for the United States. So tourism makes up just over 1% of GDP in the United States. In Spain, it's a little bit higher. We are looking at 5.2. In Croatia, which is the country that we're going to talk about in a moment, it is 19.9% of GDP. And in the Palau Islands, which are east of the Philippines, it is actually 48.4% of GDP. So here, half of the economy, half of the income that people are generating is dependent on tourism activity. Now, you see here that tourism in certain destinations, which are built around tourism, which have got opportunities for significant tourism activity. Obviously, tourism is a driver of economic development, but it's also posing a risk factor, because if something happens in the destination, so say if there is a natural disaster, if there are man-made disasters, if we experience political instability, then obviously the tourism activity is going to decline, and this is going to cause significant economic and also societal complications for the destination. So I think there are two things here really. First of all, a destination or destination resilience begins with understanding the tourism potential. It also necessitates an understanding of what happens if tourism declines. Yeah, so what are the implications of reduced tourism activity for the economy? And that may then lead to policy decisions as to whether the economy wishes to diversify. So heavy reliance on tourism isn't always a good thing, dependent on how vulnerable the destination is to potential shocks. So I think having an understanding of the, first of all, the potential, but also the vulnerability that this brings to a destination, that is very, very important. And then, of course, the next question becomes as to how we can protect tourism activity in the best possible way, so that if there is an adverse event like a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, that tourism doesn't suffer so horrendously that the destination as a consequence suffers long-term implications. So what can we do to make sure that tourism activity can bounce back should something adverse happens in a destination? So I suppose this is just a little introduction before I start talking about the case study, just so that we can get our head around the importance of tourism as an economic activity. Now, what is also important for us to understand is that countries around the world are measuring tourism activity, and this is by means of a tourism satellite account. So across the globe, destinations, and here I'm talking about countries, are using a standard statistical framework which has been developed by the World Tourism Organization and also by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the Statistical Office of the European Communities and the United Nations Statistics Division. And basically the purpose of this is to have a standardized framework for measuring tourism activity and also for comparing tourism activity across different destinations. And you see here some of the measures that are included in this framework. So we're looking at inbound and domestic tourism and also outbound tourism expenditure. So basically destinations need to have an understanding of how many visitors are coming to the destination, how many domestic tourists can be counted that contribute to economic activity, and also outbound tourism expenditure. So for example, within the UK, outbound tourism expenditure, so people leaving the UK for holiday purposes, outweighs, for example, domestic tourism. And that has always been historically the case because the UK is an island. The weather here is not as nice as it is in the Mediterranean, for example, in Southeast Asia. So the Brits like to go abroad. So we have those different forms of tourism activity that are being measured, and what we also look at is, for example, internal tourism expenditure, so inbound and domestic tourism together. The different production accounts of tourism industry. So basically, how much is the accommodation sector worth? How much are travel agencies worth cumulatively? Leisure attractions, etc., etc. Then we have got the gross value added and gross domestic product attributable to tourism. So gross value added obviously also considers say the income that non-tourism related agencies and organizations are sort of reaping from tourism activities, such as shops and destinations, for example, local transport, and so on. It measures employment. Investment is very important as well, because if we have a tourism for a destination that wishes to develop as a tourism destination, it may need to look at its investment figures and may need to think about how to increase investment. The role of the government is being measured as well, and also non-monetary indicators such as quality of life, the level of education, the age of the tourism workforce, and so on and so on. So you see here a lot of work is going into understanding the role that tourism plays as an economic activity, and also in monitoring how this contribution is developing, behaving over time, so that we can understand trends in different destinations. So basically, is tourism increasing or is tourism decreasing in significance? And this then leads to policy decisions of the sort that I have alluded to earlier, i.e. do we want to develop tourism or do we want to diversify our economy, because maybe this is going to make the destination overall more resilient. Now, there are destinations that in the past couple of decades have decided to focus increasingly on tourism development. For example, India is a country which is a very good example of that sort. When I was living in India, the incoming tourism activity was very, very small. It was probably between 1% and 3%. But India has decided that it wanted to develop tourism as an economic contributor, and has, whilst I was living there, invested very heavily and very strategically into tourism infrastructure. And the first thing that the government did was to open up in tourism development for foreign investment activity. Up until then, the investment regulations were very strict. So, for example, a foreign country or foreign company wasn't allowed to invest into the Indian tourism economy. And this then changed gradually to regulations that allowed foreign investors to part-own tourism establishments and hotels, and the proportion of ownership was gradually increased. And the purpose of this was very much to protect national organizations and to give them the opportunity to move into the industry as a first mover. So you could see that hotel organizations like Taj, for example, or Oberoi, they have placed their properties into strategic destinations, and after that, the Indian government opened up the market for foreign investment, because it got to a point where that was necessary in order to grow, say, tourism capacity, accommodation capacity to the point that they wanted. So you see, so we've got an example here of how policy making has been very instrumental in giving tourism a greater significance. Now, if you're looking at small island states, which are like the Palau Islands, like the Maldives, for example, that are very heavily dependent on tourism, I would imagine that the reverse will have happened. I would imagine that in those destinations, conversations will have taken place to think about diversifying the economy, to reduce the reliance on tourism. So maybe entrepreneurship, maybe looking at some of the natural resources and looking at how these can be used in different ways, maybe for the production of consumer goods. Maybe that would be a better way forward, or maybe how countries that are very much dependent on or destinations that are very much dependent on imports, how they can become more self-sufficient by investing more into innovations in agriculture. So you see here that when it comes to understanding tourism, the link between destination resilience and tourism development, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It really depends on the makeup of the destination, and you need to look at the characteristics of the destinations and the potential of tourism, and then what is the most sensible way of developing tourism on a case-by-case basis. Now, talking about cases, what I will do now for the next 15 to 20 minutes, I would like to talk to you about Croatia as a tourism destination. So I'll take you to Europe, into not my time zone, but into the Central European time zone, and into the Mediterranean. So if you're looking at the map of Europe here, here's the United Kingdom. You see here this little estuary. This is the Severn estuary, and right at the top here, this is where I'm currently sitting. So if you're looking at the United Kingdom, right under the G, this is where Gloucestershire is, and this is where I am at this moment in time. Now, I'm going to take you to this place here, Croatia. Yeah, so opposite Italy. I don't know if Game of Thrones is a thing in Indonesia, but it's a very famous fantasy series which has been produced in part in Croatia. So you see, it's opposite Italy, bordering onto Austria, Hungary, and different states here on this side. And this is really the bit that I'm going to talk to you about now. Because up until 1990, so we're talking, oh my goodness, 32 years ago, Croatia was part of Yugoslavia. So most of you will probably be too young to remember this, but Croatia was part of Yugoslavia, which consisted of these states here: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Macedonia, and Montenegro. Now, some of these will ring a bell, maybe for different reasons. So Montenegro and Macedonia are very famous tourist destinations, but some of you may associate perhaps not so nice events with Yugoslavia as a country, because when Croatia became independent, this led to a very, very horrific war between Serbia and the western parts of Yugoslavia. So Serbia did not want Croatia or Bosnia or Herzegovina or Slovenia to become independent, so this led to a very bloody war. And the reason why this is significant and why this makes Croatia a very good case study is because Yugoslavia, up until then, was a very prosperous tourist destination. You can see why. Croatia has got a very, very long coastline. It has got a lot of beautiful islands, and it is part of the Adriatic Sea. So the Adriatic Sea is very shallow. It's very sheltered, which makes the Adriatic a beautiful destination for sailing, for snorkeling, for boating, yachting, because it's very safe. It's also very easily accessible from places like Austria, for example, or Germany, or from Hungary. So holidaymakers from across this part of Europe used to come to Yugoslavia, predominantly to Croatia. Many of them were driving in their own cars because it was accessible by land, obviously. And Croatia, because it was part of Yugoslavia, because Yugoslavia was a socialist state, actually making holidays in this destination was very cheap. Yeah, so it was very attractive for that reason. Now, the majority of travelers who used to frequent Croatia, apart from, or Yugoslavia at the time, apart from domestic travelers, were those who liked staying in caravans. Many of them would have stayed on campsites, and those who were staying in hotel accommodation normally didn't pay very much. Yeah, they were looking for very economical holiday options. Now, because Yugoslavia was a socialist state, most of the tourism establishments, including the hotels, were state-owned. So that meant that the quality wasn't particularly good, but it was attractive to this particular market at the time. So the tourism industry was of a particular makeup. The travelers that came were of a particular makeup, and that worked quite well for a long time, up until the war. So obviously, when you are looking at a country which is at war, that means people were very reluctant to travel to Yugoslavia or to parts of Croatia, even though it has been possible. So it would have been possible to travel to the coast. Parts of the coast were relatively safe, but the tourism industry has seen a very big dent. And then we had 1990. Which is when Croatia became independent, the war was over, and the country could think about how to reposition itself as a Western European country, and also what to do with its beautiful sort of landscape, and what to do with its tourism product. So what I'd like to do is talk you through this process and some of the decisions that Croatia made at the time. So this is what we had, Yugoslavia, and now we've got this yellow bit, Croatia, which is independent and needs to rethink its role as a tourist destination. So the historic background, as I said, is that it was independent since 1990. And before the war, the tourism activity to Yugoslavia, the whole of Yugoslavia, was around 10 million international visitors per year. The majority of them went to the Croatian coast because that was the most attractive place to go. And current tourism activity is in the region of 10 million international visitors per year as well. So these are figures that I've looked at this morning. Now, what this tells us are two things. First of all, 10 million international visitors for Croatia is quite big, because Croatia is a small country. It has got a population of 4.5 million. So you can see here that twice as many people are coming to the country per year for holiday purposes. So it is quite significant, 19% of GDP. But what this also tells us is that Croatia has bounced back to pre-war levels, and it bounced back very, very quickly. And also that tourism activity has remained very stable, from pre-war activities, and also over the last 30 years after independence. So it hasn't grown, it hasn't exploded, it has actually stayed very stable. And that is a result of policy making. That is a result of the government in 1990 deciding that they wanted to develop tourism in a way that was very careful, very measured, and that was focused on sustainability. Yeah, so this is what we can see reflected here in this trend. So let's have a look at some of the challenges that Croatia was facing in 1990. First of all, we had a very outdated accommodation sector. So you see this building here. Yeah, this is a hotel which was built in Yugoslavian times, a state-owned hotel next to the beautiful city of Dubrovnik. So you see here, there's nothing pretty about this this building. It's very concrete. It's standing out like an eyesore on this beautiful coastline. And you can see that there are not many amenities. So basically this here is the area where guests can sunbathe and go for a swim. It is not very nicely landscaped. And this is an example of what hotel accommodation looked like. Yeah, so basically they were buildings which were not architecturally not very pleasing, aesthetically not very pleasing. There was not much consideration as to how these buildings fitted into the environment. And from a guest experience, you could imagine that this is nowhere near the international standard that, say, travelers nowadays would expect. And we've got the problem of the coastline being defaced. Yes, this was one of the problems. So the majority of these hotels were probably operating in the 3-star sector, but certainly there were no hotels that could have accommodated upmarket tourism, let alone any of the more sustainable forms of tourism, like ecotourism. So that capacity simply did not exist. So that was a problem, an outdated accommodation sector that could not attract a type of traveler, a type of tourist that might have spent more money in the destination so that tourism could actually contribute to post-war recovery, and so on and so on. There was a lack of diversification. So basically we had that kind of hotel. We had private apartments, which were also not necessarily of very high quality. They were very basic. We had campsites and we had marinas. So basically those who were wealthier, those who could afford it, would have explored the coastline by boat, but the actual accommodation sector was lacking in diversification, and so also the overall tourism product. So basically, we had, hotel tourism. In this kind of establishment, we had camping, we had boating. So these were the forms of tourism which were pre-1990 promoted across Yugoslavia. So that's internationally not a very attractive, not a very competitive tourism product if you're thinking about what tourism looks like these days. And if you're thinking about the fact that in the 1990s, travelers were starting to become much, much more sophisticated. They no longer wanted this. They wanted to have a different product. They wanted to have more authentic experience. That was also the time when sustainability was put onto the international agenda and was put onto the development agenda for tourism authorities. So outdated accommodation, lack of diversification, not just in terms of the accommodation sector, but in terms of the overall destination product. Croatia also had a lack of management expertise. So because of the way in which the tourism industry had developed in Yugoslavia, where the focus was not very much on quality, there wasn't really within the country the management expertise to develop the destination to a high quality standard. There was very certainly a lack of investment power. The nation was very poor. if you can, we were looking at a state-owned tourism sector before. The country, obviously, after the war was in socioeconomic distress. It was an economic recession. So there wasn't really within the country the power to invest into new capacity. There was no sustainability focus up until then. So sustainability wasn't something that was widely understood. And also, unfortunately, there were areas within Croatia which could not be used for tourism activity because of landmines. Obviously, during the war, quite a lot of landmines were placed in strategically important areas. And I'm very sorry to say that many of them still not have been cleared up. So there are parts within the country, within the hinterlands, that cannot be used for tourism activity, or only in a very limited way. So you cannot actually go hiking without a guide who knows where it is safe, which paths are safe, which paths perhaps are not so safe. And I'm just going to go back to this map here. So obviously, the parts which were affected by landmines were here, right at the border to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yeah, this is very close to the coastline. So many people are drawn to the coastline because of the islands. There are a lot of vineyards, for example, a lot of opportunities to see the beautiful coastline, but there are also national parks. So here, for example, if you're looking at this part here, there's a national park called Velebit, which is very famous for climbers. And somewhere here, we've got a national park called the Plitvice Lakes, very, very beautiful. And it's an area of outstanding natural beauties, but going outside of that park onto, say, your own hiking tour, as you can imagine, is very, very dangerous. Yeah, so it's a huge challenge. So the legacy that the war has left. So the question now becomes how to deal with all of these challenges. What did Croatia do to turn itself into this beautiful destination, this prosperous destination that it is today, and into a destination that can prosper with tourism activity that stays level? Yeah, just think about this 10 million visitors. And despite the pandemic, still 10 million. And the dip during the pandemic in Croatia wasn't actually that significant because of the nature of the tourism product. So what Croatia did, first of all, it has decided to start with a rebranding strategy. So I said earlier, because of the nature of the Yugoslavian tourism product, actually, most people were associating Croatia with the Balkan. So poor quality, lots of people who are going camping, hotels which are not particularly nice. So Croatia decided to distance itself from this and say the Mediterranean as it once was. Because before Croatia became part of Yugoslavia, its history is actually, its origin is in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy and in Italy. So particularly the north has been influenced a lot by Italy, by the Romans. So basically, rather than focusing on the more recent past, the Soviet influence and so on, Croatia decided to focus more on the history before, so the origins of the nation. And that led to this rebranding, Croatia, the Mediterranean as it once was. And you can see already from this image, it looks much, much more vibrant than this picture of this hotel that I've shown you a moment ago. It has thought very, very carefully about its development policy. So the tourism authorities have decided that they no longer wanted to attract the same kind of traveler as before. They wanted to upgrade the tourism product and wanted to have a more diverse tourism product. So they have looked at segment diversification, and they have also very carefully looked at how to develop tourism infrastructure. So rather than permitting the building of new hotels. They have encouraged investors to look at existing capacities, existing buildings, and to refurbish them, to upgrade them from, say, 3-star property to a 5-star property. Because this helped address the issue of quality, but it also helped to protect the coastline and to protect the environment. So you're not adding any further buildings or just very limited, a limited number of buildings. You're trying to use the buildings that already exist, and you try to upgrade them into aesthetically more pleasing, into more environmentally sustainable buildings. So this was a very, very strict policy. And also, when it comes to the buildings themselves, the authorities have said that no building which is near the coastline may be higher than 2 stories. Yeah, so this is another way of protecting the coastline and to preventing that sort of ugly development that we have seen before. They have also looked at attracting strategic investment and to invest strategically into destinations which would attract a particular type of traveler. So I'm going to go back to my map again, which is quite important. So when we're looking at the main tourist regions within Croatia, we've got 3 main tourist regions. We've got Istria here, Istria and Kvarner, the peninsula. We've got Mid-Dalmatia here. And then we've got South Dalmatia. Now, Dubrovnik, the pearl of the Adriatic, is here. So this is probably the most famous destination within Croatia, which attracts a lot of upmarket tourism. A lot of celebrities are going to Dubrovnik. They're either mooring up with their yachts or are staying in hotels around Dubrovnik. Istria, which is accessible from the other countries around, or most accessible, is very diverse. So basically here we've got a lot of Roman history. We've got a lot of opportunities for, say, farm tourism, for wine tourism, for cycling, for hiking, because the infrastructure here is very good. And because it's a peninsula, because it's a peninsula, you can travel around very easily. So for those who are seeking different experiences whilst they are in the destination, Istria is a very good destination. And then we've got Mid-Dalmatia here. Now, Mid-Dalmatia has a bit of a challenge. It's got a very beautiful coastline, but the beaches are very rocky. They're very stony. Some of them are very steep. So the beaches, for example, are not very suitable for families with children. So if you want to attract families with children in this destination, you need to think about an alternative way. And the other challenge, as I've said before, is that the hinterlands here, they can only be used to a very limited extent because of the landmine issue. So we've got 3 very distinct regions. And what the tourist authorities have decided was that they would seek strategic investment in each of these regions, which would capitalize on the strength of those regions. Yeah. So, for example, in Dubrovnik and around Dubrovnik, the government decided to work with strategic investors from overseas, those who had a link to Croatia because they had family roots in Croatia, but who had the investment power to actually upgrade hotels to a 5-star standard, so that this destination could become the pearl of the Adriatic and capitalize on its previous image of as being this as well. So some strategic investment took place here, and with this was strategic investment into say management capabilities. A lot of training from international hotel companies and tour operators took place in order to elevate management capability within this destination as well. Now here, the investment that took place, again, capitalized on the nature of the region. So we saw investments into the development of eco-lodges, for example, and farm tourism, apartment tourism, cycling paths, so that those who wanted to explore the destination by bike were able to do so safely. So you can see that a lot of strategic investment took place to really develop that region in a different way for a different kind of traveler than here, the South, which was focusing on luxury and resort tourism. And then we've got Mid-Dalmatia, where we've seen a lot of investment into the building of marinas, because I said the best way to explore this coastline here is by boat. And some of the international tour operators were looking into all-inclusive properties. And that makes a lot of sense, because the whole point of building an all-inclusive resort is to keep tourists in the resort. You provide the entertainment, you provide the food in the resort, you're building pools, for example, where children can play. So given what I've just said about this region not being suitable for, beach holidays, family beach holidays, nor for exploring the hinterlands, the all-inclusive concept was the most sensible way forward. So what you can see now is that from this destination in 1990, which was lacking diversification, which was lacking quality, which was lacking a sustainability focus. And I'm talking about a sustainability focus here from an environmental perspective, but also from a tourism development perspective here. We now have this really diverse destination where there are strategic partnerships, where strategic investment, and also where there has been a very conscious choice about limiting tourism development to a level that the authorities felt were within the carrying capacity of the destination. Okay, so let me just move forward. So this is what we were focusing on: rebranding, development policies, segment diversification, strategic investment, a focus on upgrading capacities instead of building new ones, and focus on sustainability. And the sustainability focus, if we're talking about environmental sustainability for a moment, was really a very strong one. So Croatia has invested a lot into tourist education, into the availability of recycling in tourist attractions, and also close to beaches. Many of the beaches within Croatia have gained a blue flag status, which means that the water is of very, very good quality. Those were strategies, or those were basically images and also facts that were marketed in the destination branding strategies, because really Croatia wanted to get away from this previous not so nice image to one which is contemporary, which is focusing on sustainability, where nature was emphasized, where culture was emphasized, where also tourism entrepreneurship was emphasized. So all of a sudden, little producers were beginning to capitalize on tourism activity, selling their local produce, honeys, jams, drinks, etc., etc. So we've seen this whole entrepreneurial activity around tourism mushrooming. And on Wednesday, you're going to hear more about the link between tourism and entrepreneurship when Neil is holding his session. So the way Croatia did it, as I said, was through strategic partnerships. Now, one of the strategic partnerships was the German Investment Corporation. So, as I said, Croatia itself lacked the expertise to come up with a contemporary tourism strategy that met all the requirements that I have gone through, i.e. diversification, sustainability focus, upgrading of expertise, investment power, and so on. So the German Investment Corporation wrote the master plan, the tourism master plan, and this master plan was based on the priorities that I have introduced. Croatia started to work with key investors, so those who had investment power, who could invest into lovely properties that would make the destination attractive, and that would also be in line with the development policies. You see here on these two slides, this is in a similar spot as this ugly building that I have shown you earlier. But this here is a hotel which has been built with the assistance of an Argentinian investor. And you see here that this building is integrated into the landscape. It looks much, much nicer. You see here that there is a lovely landscaped area with a pool, and it looks aesthetically pleasing, and it's integrated into the landscape as well, because this rock that you see here, that's very typical for the Croatian coastline. So basically you see here that the approach towards building this particular property has been very, very different. And also Croatia has started to work with tour operators with access to target segments. So for example, it has supported tour operators which were very diversified in their product offering in the north, in Istria. So Ide River is an example of a tour operator which has sold most holidays in the past couple of decades to Istria, biking holidays, food holidays. They've also invested into capacity, into eco lodges, for example. And in the south, some of the larger operators like TUI, for example, who had investment power, were those that the government worked with strategically, because they could direct travel flows. So basically, Croatia has really thought about using its tourism product in a strategic way, and by doing so has also protected itself from being overly reliant on only one market. And that's quite important, because if you have got an adverse event, such as, for example, political instability, war, or natural disasters, there will be certain segments who will be very apprehensive of traveling to that destination for a long time. So, for example, families with children were not necessarily the first ones to return, but there are other segments, such as the cultural segment, maybe adventure travelers, those who are interested in adventure sports, in yachting, maybe in climbing or so. They are less risk averse, and having this mix of segments makes it possible for destinations to recover more easily after a shock, because you can focus on segments which are a little bit less risk averse before inviting the bigger masses back into the destination. So you can see here, Croatia is an example that brings together quite a lot of the principles built around the creation of a resilient destination. Now I've got about 10 minutes left, so what I'll do now, I'm going to move on. The problem is, once you give me a stage, it's very difficult to make me shut up. Yes, so basically the principles that we were talking about here were destination zoning, destination product and target segment match, and also strategic dispersion of tourism partnerships. And everything that I have said up until now is what came out of my research that I did a few years ago when I was talking to the destination authorities and also to some of the tour operators within Croatia. So from this, let's move on to a few key models which may be of interest to you from a sort of conceptual perspective. Now, this here is quite a generic model that outlines the tourism disaster management framework. Now, you see here that regardless of what we're talking about, we can say disaster management framework, some call it crisis management framework. You see here that we have different phases, normally a pre-event, the prodromal, which is where we can see that a crisis is about to emerge, then the actual emergency stage, an intermediate stage, which is where the situation is stabilizing, then the long-term recovery, and the resetting of the destination. Now, with regard to Croatia, of course, the war covered these three phases. So we had a pre-event where we could see that political instability was rising. Then we could see the mobilization of resources in the emergency phase, and then the stabilization where recovery was possible. Now, depending on what kind of disaster or crisis we are looking at, these stages will look different. Now, if you're looking at, for example, the 2004 tsunami that has ripped through Southeast Asia in 2004, the pre-event and the prodromal phases were very, very, very short. The tsunami has hit many destinations without warning, and then all of a sudden we were in an emergency, which meant that many, many destinations were not able to prepare. Now, when we're talking about the eruption, or possibly the next eruption of Mount Merapi, there will be a warning phase, because obviously volcanic activity of Mount Merapi is monitored, and when it reaches a particular stage, evacuations are taking place, tourism activity in certain zones will stop. So there are opportunities to mitigate against the wider effects of any disasters. And I think that's very important, is that looking at this framework here, the risk assessment and the disaster contingency plans very much depends on the nature of the destination and the hazards that a destination is facing. And then on the basis of this, it is possible to think about possible mitigation approaches. Now, what is also important when it comes to understanding principles of destination resilience is this here, Butler's destination life cycle, which is probably one of the seminal models when it comes to destination management and destination development. So what we see is that every destination goes through certain phases. So here, if we're having a destination which is not explored, and we can even say that Croatia in 1990 was in this phase here because it has rebranded itself. Or no, let's go back to say Yugoslavia, when it when tourism in Yugoslavia developed. So there was an exploration phase, an involvement phase. So this is a phase where there is a lot of investment into tourism activity, into tourism infrastructure, where there's a growing number of visitors, where the economic significance of tourism in this destination is increasing as well. And so where we also see a change in segments that are visiting a destination. So at the exploration stage, we are probably looking at people who are interested in the culture, who are very adventurous, who are open to new experiences. But as the destination develops and becomes more mainstream, we are beginning to see an increasing number of travelers who are mainstream, who basically are more interested in ticking off experiences rather than engaging with the destination in a more intimate way. And this is often the point where we see saturation, where there is a stagnation, and either the destination goes into decline or decides to rejuvenate itself. Now, Croatia, just after the war, was falling into this category here. So we had a lot of travelers who were looking for cheap holidays, sand, sea, beach holidays, but not necessarily travelers who were interested in the culture, who were interested in sustainability, who were interested in local produce. So what we could see is that Croatia at the time decided to do something in order to prevent this decline. So they've actually rejuvenated themselves by looking at increase, or basically by inviting a more diverse set of segments. And this is what happens very often in destinations that have seen this stagnation, is that actually tourism authorities are thinking about, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now in order to rejuvenate our tourism product, or what can we do to keep tourism economy or the economic activity stable? And I've given you some examples as to how this can be done. Now, what we also need to understand is that, and this is taken from an expert essay by Harper, is that resilience requires systems thinking. So we need to understand the destination as a system, the different agencies, and we need to understand what makes a destination resilient. Yeah, so it could be resilience towards environmental hazards. So if we have, let's say, a volcano, as you have in Jakarta, we need to have proper monitoring systems. We need to have proper evacuation measures. We need to make sure that both travelers and also the local population are duly educated. And also we need to have what we call adaptive capacities. So basically, if a destination is hit by a disaster, how can it recover? How can it adapt? How can it change its economic focus? Or how can tourism activity change in order to encourage future economic activity? And this is what makes it sustainable. Yeah, so anything from if you're looking at coastal areas, say tsunami warning systems, and also measures to keep buildings safe, having coastlines protected to a more or less sophisticated way would be part of this. So we need to understand the system. Now, here we've got an example of what a destination system might look like. Yeah, we have a land system, which includes, for example, infrastructure, which also includes so basically cities, harbors, industries, roads, also resorts, could be tourist attractions as well. Land systems also include things like solid waste and sanitation, very important. Spaces, also river systems, because rivers can be used for transport. They also pose hazards, for example, flooding hazards. We've got coastal systems such as beaches, shorelines, estuaries, lagoons, but also activities that are taking place. What also is included in this is, for example, levels of pollution, marine habitats, and so on and so on. And also what we need to understand are what we call dynamic and continuous interactions. So basically the erosion of rocks, energy from tides, movements of organic matter. Yeah. So this is an illustration of what a coastal system, destination systems looks like. And really destination resilience begins with understanding the makeup of this system, and then we begin to understand where it's vulnerable. Yeah, so if we're looking at plastic pollution, if we take this as an example, plastic pollution is a huge problem across Indonesia and Southeast Asia, and we need to think about what this does to, say, our marine life. Now, if plastic pollution is gradually destroying our marine life, now, that means that there are less fish in the sea. That will affect our food systems. That will also affect tourism activity. If people don't want to go to places which are polluted. So one of the first things to address would be plastic pollution. Yeah. So understanding the system, understanding the makeup of that system, understanding the vulnerabilities allows us to think about strategies for building destination resilience from an environmental and also from a disaster perspective. Yeah, Croatia was a good example of how to build destination resilience through engaging with tourist segments and with investors in a strategic way. Here, we've got an illustration that helps us to understand how we can make a destination resilient from sustainability, environmental sustainability, but also from a disaster perspective. Yeah, so systems thinking is incredibly important. So basically, this is a summary, a very useful one. When it comes to destination resilience, we need to understand those 5 components here. We need to understand the economic power of tourism, so the dependence on tourism, and what might happen if all of a sudden there is a financial crisis. We need to understand the visitor profile, but also ways of engaging with visitors to make sure that we are attracting the right ones, and also that we manage tourist behavior. Yeah, so what can we do to make sure that tourists are not contributing to pollution in a particular area, but also health and safety. So basically, do we have a destination which is properly, where there's proper sanitation, where there's food security, where we know how to deal with disease outbreaks, where we understand the threat of, say, terrorism or political instability, but where we also take measures to keep our visitors safe. I'm very proud that I'm currently involved in a research project which is led by Universitas Ahmad Dahlan, by a colleague who is looking into how to make tourism villages around Yogyakarta safer, because accidents due to lack of health and safety standards is an issue. So destination resilience requires things like this as well. And of course, community engagement and making sure that the community is part of the tourism resilience strategy and has opportunities for entrepreneurship, for employment, and so on and so on. So a very good model that summarizes quite a few of the things that we have talked about over the last 65 minutes. Right, for you, I have got some ideas for further reading. So all of these articles can be accessed online, and what is also quite interesting, so we've got some examples of how to build resilience in coastal cities, and this one here, Kausa and Kriswati, linking interpretation with amenities and educating visitors in volcanic environment, is actually using Mount Merapi as a case study, so might be quite interesting for you to have a look at. Okay, I think that brings me to the end of my presentation, and please do feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you, Nadine. I know they already exceed 60 minutes, but actually I'm glad to know that it's okay. You can spend 70 minutes, 80 minutes, fine. Giving you more free.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me off.
It's okay. Actually, we want more, yeah, like in the States, we want more from you. But I think also some audience are not patient to ask some questions. If I may, I need your permissions. I'm going to read some questions from the audience through the chat. But you have to know that actually I have 5 my questions myself. I hide, don't worry. But I'll take questions from the audience first. The first is from Miss Rifki Wijayanti, one of our teacher in our colleagues, and also one of activists in tourism. She's very concerned in tourism. And she asked, is there any support such as tourism training for local citizens who live close to the tourism destination? Nadine, and could you elaborate the specific trainings they obtain? Thank you. This question from Kiki, Miss Kiki, Nadine.
So would you mind repeating the question? I
Repeat,
was just expecting somebody tried to call me on Teams.
Is there any support such as tourism training for local citizens who live close to that tourism destination? I think maybe she concerned with the tourism in Croatia. Yeah, maybe is there any support like tourism training for local citizens? And could you please elaborate what kind of specific trainings they obtain from those local citizens?
Right. Okay. This is that's a very big question, and I think the answer is that it varies across different destinations. So you will see that in countries which are very heavily dependent on tourism, there will be a training infrastructure. So if we're taking the case of Croatia, Croatia has got two very good universities that are teaching tourism. So one is based in Dubrovnik, and another one is based in Split. And this is where education has always taken place, and where those who wanted to go into managerial positions would have studied tourism, and it would have been the programs would have been very much aimed at developing an understanding of what tourism within the region is about. Now, what happened during the recovery phase was that international educational institutions, particularly Swiss institutions, started to set up campuses in Croatia, and this was very much to bring international expertise into the country. And we see now that there are a lot of private providers who are specializing in tourism simply because the educational needs changed. Basically, the education needed to look different. And this is something that you will see replicated across different countries as well. So every country that is dependent on tourism will offer tourism education of some sort. In many cases where maybe the tourism industry isn't that developed, those will be vocational qualifications. You will see a focus on those, not necessarily an emphasis on degree level education, but as the importance of tourism rises, you will see a greater investment into higher level qualifications. So I hope that answers your question.
Kiki, is the question already satisfying you? The answer, I mean, or do you want to continue further, Kiki, Ms. Rifki?
Well, I got the idea of putting educational institution as the most important part, especially here in the tourism area in Croatia. And, you know, can I give a little bit more questions?
Yeah, more, a little bit means,
just a little bit, just
no worries. Okay.
Wanted to know how about the local citizens or the local people who live close by to the tourist destination, but they don't have any higher level of education. So what kind of supports that the government give to them? Probably the, you know, like sort of the form of the suitable training for them.
Okay, I understand. I can give you an example from Gloucestershire. I don't know how it works in Croatia these days, but I can give you an example from Gloucestershire. So, for example, at the University of Gloucestershire, we have got a growth hub. And that growth hub supports local entrepreneurs with, say, startup advice and also, you know, other business support activities. And such establishments will be replicated in other destinations. So, for example, we have replicated this in Indonesia. And where there is a lot of tourism activity within an area, and Gloucestershire is an example of such an area in the UK, those growth hubs will offer specialist training to tourism entrepreneurs. So basically, they may have designated training programs on how to market a tourist establishment or how to, say, set up a bed and breakfast. But at the same time, the other business support services or business training on, say, how to deal with finances, how to deal with human resources, how to deal with marketing, how to deal with social media, how to deal with issues such as cybersecurity, for example. These are generic training programs which will be accessible through such establishments. And I would imagine that across other destinations, either such establishments will exist or the tourist boards will offer such training services. But I think it's a very, very important question. And I'd be interested to actually look into some comparative studies as well as to what a good practice model is.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, actually, honestly speaking, I have numbers of questions, but I'll keep that for
great.
now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But thank you very much. It's such insightful answers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, one requirement to be resilient in academic is you have to have many questions, right? Okay, now we have also Mr. Muhammad Saiful. He is also activist in tourism, especially in empowering local people. And he want to ask, I think, because he also known as a singer, you need to listen to his voice originally. So Pak Saiful, would you please not to chat but ask directly to Nadine so we can hear your beautiful voice?
Hello, Nadine.
Hello.
Good afternoon. You look
Good
wonderful.
afternoon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will come up with human resources, Nadine. Would you like to inform us these issues, particularly on your study, on your research? Yeah, it's involving the awareness and also the role and etc. I think it's very important for us because I think in our area, the human resource is a big issue right now. Infrastructure is not so a big deal. Yeah, because mostly we develop ecotourism right now, and nature provide the everything. Yeah, but human resource, I think, the big issue. Can you inform us about that? Thank you.
I'm sorry. So what is your question?
Yeah.
What is your question?
The question is, I don't know. Maybe your experience about how to cultivate human resources and we should prepare. Yeah, we have potential in nature. We have a lot of potential in nature, but I think we need cultivate or what it's called
harvest, like harvest.
The human resources, yes. Because
I think I think I understand what you're saying. I suppose the question is around how to use your resources sensibly. And when it comes to developing, I'm aware Indonesia has got a lot of focus on ecotourism. And for me, it's very much about coming up with a solution that is built around the ecosystem of a place. So, for example, I visited a coffee plantation in Bali, and basically that little it was a tourist. Sorry, I think I was just muted.
Okay.
So you see, it's very much about understanding how to use that ecosystem from say building from building the coffee plantation, but and then also interacting with the wildlife, finding natural ways to preserve the area, finding ways to commercialize the area as well by developing products, and by developing a story which educates the traveler. So I think it's very much about finding those innovative solutions whereby you're using an area for tourism activity, but actually in a way that brings humans in harmony with that area. I think that's a very important way of looking at interacting with the natural environment. And I think there are certain parts of the world that are better at doing this than others. But I think having that education, so basically how you can interact with the natural environment in a way that's sustainable, that is for me one of the educational focal points that we need to consider very strongly and increasingly so. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's sort of my attempt to begin to answer it.
Yeah, I think it's already. Saiful, is that okay? You want
Yeah, but I want to add some more, Pak Rifai.
Extensive questions. Yeah.
Okay, Nadine. So yeah, mostly because our local people not really literate, in terms of tourism. Meaning that if there are tourism, local and international ones, they mostly the local ones adjust the cultures, the international tourism. But consequently, in terms of culture, we have such kind of decline. I don't know what we call it. Based on your study or maybe your experience, maybe the local follow the tourism cultures, or the international tourism will adjust the local culture in this context, mostly.
I think I see what you're saying, and I agree that this has been a problem in many parts of the world, is that too much focus was placed on the commercial opportunities and too little consideration was placed on the impact that development would have on communities and also on the actual nature of the place. And if you're looking at contemporary tourism strategies, ideally, and I'm talking about an ideal because I think we are far away from achieving this ideal, the local community should have a say in how tourism is being developed, and also should have a say in, for example, the development of destination branding strategies, so that a traveler is actually experiencing an authentic tourism product. Now, achieving this and achieving the balance between exploiting commercial opportunities and making sure that the culture, the sense of place of a destination is preserved. Now, that is quite difficult. And there is no one-size-fits-all approach. I think it does require a very careful case-by-case analysis. But I think having the involvement of communities in policymaking is absolutely fundamental.
Okay.
Thank you, Nadine. We are waiting for other questions and other sharing from other audiences. And I wonder, the case of Croatia, is it happening this latest year, 2022 or 2019?
So the rebranding strategy, the policy that I have been talking about, this is the policy that was developed post 1990. So just after the
pandemic.
Yugoslavian War. No, 1990. So after
1990,
after the Yugoslavian War, during the pandemic, Croatia has actually been very resilient. And it has been very resilient simply because of the nature of the tourism product, because it's possible to, many establishments are small. There's a lot of focus on boating, so you could stay in bubbles, you could be socially distant. And also Croatia is very accessible by car. So basically people from Austria, from Italy, from Slovenia, from Germany, they could go by car. Which obviously made it possible to travel during the pandemic, because you will remember flying certainly in 2020 and 2021 was bound to complications.
Very hard to fly. It's many rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Another my wonder is, when you are introducing land system and coastal system, seems that Indonesia has both of them. Do you think Indonesia can be faster in developing the tourism for having this kind of two system?
I think Indonesia has got a lot of potential for tourism development because of its natural resources and the diversity of, say, the landscape, the diversity of the habitats, the flora and fauna. It's absolutely amazing, and also the heritage in Indonesia is very rich. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for developing tourism. And from what I can see, I mean, I have been working with Indonesia for a long time now, since 2015. There is also a very strong understanding of resilience and a very big focus on sustainability, probably even more so than you see in many European countries. So I think there are a lot of best practice models from across Indonesia that can be used to develop tourism. I think for me the question is how it's possible to scale it up. You know what I mean? So how do we replicate best practice approaches across Indonesia? So for example, I know that UAD and UII are working very much with tourism villages in the Yogyakarta region. So how can we take this knowledge and then apply it in other regions of Indonesia which are facing similar challenges? So I think the solutions are there. It's about how to scale them up, how to maybe integrate them into a bigger policy framework. This is where, in my view, the challenge lies.
I want to ask more actually, but I need to be fair to invite more questions from other perspectives.
I'm very conscious of time as well, Rifai. I will have to I will have to stop in a few minutes, unfortunately.
I thought that when making intimate conversation with you and then you forget about the time. I thought it. Actually not.
I would normally, but yeah, it's
challenging. Okay, with so many potential questions from the audience, how much time you still have for left?
Shall we say another 5 minutes or so?
5 minutes. So do you want to answer question? Do you want to make closing with your 5 minutes?
Let's have one more question.
One more questions. Okay, any question from the audience? Maybe from Ira Puspita. Her name is almost like my wife, yeah, Ira Puspita. And like your friend, Ira, do you want to ask questions or any other participants? Not, and then there will be another questions. Yeah, I'm wondering with your data. Now I just check the data that France is number 1, and then followed by Mexico and also Germany, I think. What I want to ask is the high number of international visitors is also coherent with the quality of resilience in this place?
That's an interesting question.
I
And
think you need 10 minutes to answer it. Yes, okay.
yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't have an immediate answer to this. If you're looking at big countries like Germany, for example, or France, even though they are internationally very significant tourist destinations, with the UK as well, the overall contribution of tourism to the economy of that country is relatively small. You see, so basically, if tourism for some reason declines, then the effect on the overall economy is not going to be as significant as, for example, in Croatia. So I think there are two separate questions as to, well, a good question is, do high visitor numbers, do these actually make the tourism industry more resilient? The answer is, I don't know. I don't think there's been a study of that sort. I think it's a very important question.
And question number 2, you said 2, or only one? Or
there's one more.
That's one. Okay, now I think we agree we can further make collaborative research, yeah, about to answer the latest question of mine, also the latest curiosity of us, whether or not it really affects to the GDP and also the rest to the those country. I think this very important area for collaborative research between.
I agree.
Yeah, Gloucestershire, UAD, and my center of study sector. Okay. Yeah. Yes,
I think you're right. I think it is a very good. I think there is a need for such research, and also I think for me it's about really developing a better understanding as to what makes destinations around the world resilient. So I've talked about one particular case, and I've talked about models. I think the frameworks, an understanding of the frameworks is there, but the testing of those, I think that's something that is certainly something that we should be focusing on in the future.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Nadine, for giving us very solid 90 minutes presentation discussions. Actually want to further converse, but it's limited. Okay. Then thank you so much, and everyone can send a big applause to Nadine Sulkowski.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Adi, I want to give a little bit summary of our discussion. Your speech today is resilience is very important in our tourism development, because if we don't have any good resilience, and then it's not finding to develop, to adjust, and to continue building the quality of tourism itself. And from the resilience, those who are already resilient will survive and not what do you say, in the saturation period, yeah, not in the, what do you say, not saturation, but another word for saturation,
the consolidation stage.
Yeah,
consolidation, stagnation.
Stagnation, yeah, because the resilience will determine whether the tourism destination will continue or will incline or will decline. So that's the importance of resilience is to determine the future of destination itself. Okay, thank you, Nadine. There's a lot of things actually we want to infer, but all of them already been captured and described by you clearly. And thank you for sharing the idea of hope that we will continue and follow up our discussion today with further discussion and especially joint research.
Absolutely,
no
yes. I shall look forward to that very much, yes.
Okay, thank you. And normally, my time is up as a moderator. Thank you very much. And I'm so sorry if any mistakes here and there. And I'll see you again, audience and Nadine. I'll see you next time. But don't go away first because we have another agenda to give you certificate. Wait a minute. 5 minutes again.
I stay. I stay.
Okay. Yes. And this. Thank you for the MC and the time is back to you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Nadine, and also Mr. Rifai for the warm material for today information, the new information for us as the beginner and also maybe some professional here about the tourism also. And before we close the agenda, Mr. Rifai will symbolically hand over a certificate to Mrs. Nadine. So please, Mr. Rifai, time is yours. And after that, we will do a photo session. So please open your camera.
Okay, Nadine. Yeah, normally my head of department, Pian Susanti, will hand over the certificate for you. But now, today, she mandates me to do it on behalf of her and our department. So now officially, we thank you so much for your inspiring and presentations of tourism today, and we would like to appreciate by giving you the certificate as the speaker. That's think it as a certificate presented to you here for you, Nadine
Wonderful. Thank you very
Sulkowski.
much. Thank you.
Here as well.
Thank you.
We hope you're not happy with this, and you will get your more happier if you come to Jogja, and we will give you the real and the print out of the certificate. Thank you so much, and big applause once again for Nadine Sulkowski.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rifai. And before we closing the event, we will take a picture together. So give your best pose and also open your camera. I will count one until 3. So please open your camera. Okay. Are you ready? Okay. I will count 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Okay, thank you everyone. And also ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our event today. I am Aisaril Surya representing all of the committees. I would like to say thank you so much for your participation, and let's close our event today by reciting Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Okay, don't forget to fill the
10 menit.
attendance list in the chat box. So thank you so much. Bye bye. See you soon on the next webinar. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.